I'm Roger Simmons here with Brian Schmitz. It's time for another edition of Magic Now. We're like the B team because Charles King isn't here and Josh Robbins isn't here. But we're coming off the bench. We're going to give it our all. We're going to do our best.
If it's the NBA, we're making millions of dollars.
I like that. That's great.
Here we go.
All right, so an interesting week for the Magic. Let's start by looking back a little bit. The Magic actually on a 2-game winning streak.
Wow.
Beating the Raptors, beating the 76ers. What's going on with this Magic team?
Break them up. That's what I say right now is break them up. Well, I mean, you hear this all the time, and the Magic actually said this when they hired Jock Vaughn. They said the same thing. There's going to be a big difference. Well, there actually is a big difference under Scott Skiles. You can see his imprint on the basketball team, especially, Roger, defensively. The Magic are putting up some great numbers defensively. And you know it's coaching and the coaching staff because you essentially have the same core group returning. Now, if it was a bunch of different guys, free agents they had brought in, that'd be one thing. But Skiles has the same players. He's held them accountable, and they've really stuck to their rotations. They really know what they're doing. They're communicating on the defensive end, and he's gotten these guys to play harder and to simply play better. Scott has two rules: play hard, play the right way. And they're essentially doing that right now.
That's great. All right, let's go back and recap the games. The Magic's first win came at the New Orleans Pelicans, 103-94. These aren't the best Pelicans in the world. In fact, they hadn't won a game. But how did the Magic win this one?
Well, I mean, obviously the Pelicans are banged up. They were missing a lot of key guys. And they did a pretty good job on Anthony Davis, who right now is the next coming. He's the next LeBron. He's only 22, 23 years old. He's a terrific player, 6'11", can shoot the three. He led the league in block shots the last 2 seasons. So he's the future all-star. And the Magic, Evan Fournier, you can see right there, he did a little bit of everything. He's been the Magic's best player so far in the start to this season. And it was really a community effort. Everybody chipped in. Nick Vucevic had a really good game. Victor Oladipo. So the Magic, this is how they have to win games. They don't have one guy. They don't have an Anthony Davis. So they have to rely on all their parts.
And we know the Magic had a really tough start to the beginning of the season. They were playing all these teams that were over 500 last year to start. The night after the Pelicans, the Magic take the Rockets and Dwight Howard right to overtime, which was surprising. I don't think people, especially on a back-to-back, thought that they were going to be able to do that to the Rockets.
No, I don't think anyone saw that one coming. But when James Harden is just throwing up shots and he doesn't play much defense anywhere, for as good as player as Harden is, he'll never make an all-defensive team, and I believe he was 6 for 22. So when you can get Harden on a night like that, and the Rockets were also missing a couple guys due to injury, and Dwight just is not the same guy.
No, nowhere
Physically,
near.
you can see it. He's just not the same guy as he was here in Orlando. The back surgery, the shoulder problems, the knee. Playing on that block for so many years and taking a beating is really taken a toll on Dwight, and he hasn't gotten any better offensively. So, the Rockets still are very deep. Trevor Ariza, they have a really nice bench. Corey Brewer, but the Magic again. Fournier did a lot of things. He can drive the ball. He can shoot, and yes, he's Scott Skiles' is Player of the Week.
I was going to say, we'll be talking about Mr. Fournier a lot in this segment as well. All right, they come home and they take on the best team in the East, the Toronto Raptors, and surprisingly, the Magic pull out a win. And I also will say this was probably the game that had the strangest start to the second half I've seen in an NBA game, where Scott Skiles pulled not one, not two, not three, but 5 starters off the floor. Tell me about that.
I got to tell you, I haven't seen that, I don't think, since junior high. When the coach says, okay, next 5 in, you guys sit down and have your cherry Slurpees. But that first team came out after halftime, and it looked like they had been sleeping through the whole intermission. And Skiles is waiting, and he's waiting for something to happen. Turnover here, turnover there. Nobody's getting in position. Nobody's moving the ball. Skiles like, okay, you 5, the second team, everybody. And it was funny. It looked like a whole parade coming up to the scorer's table. It's like, okay, there's 2 guys. There's another guy, and there's 2 more. Wait a minute. How many guys? You got 5?
I know. They just kept coming and coming. I'm like, what the
It's
heck?
a 5-for-5 swap. But again, I mean, Skiles really has his finger on the pulse of this team, because that second team delivered. I mean, they got the Magic back in the game, and then eventually Scott knew that he had to put the starters back in. But what this does is that sends a message all the way down the bench that even the starters are not immune to being taken out. And Scott has had this policy ever since he took over. This started in training camp, where he was taking guys off the floor after they made a mistake. And in the previous administration, I don't think we saw much of that.
No, not at all. So that worked out well, and then they go to Philadelphia on Saturday night against the Sixers, who are not the greatest of teams, but this game may be, I think, probably notable most for Elfrid Payton. Finally seemed to find his shooting touch, which had been missing most of the season so far.
Well, in the offseason, they hired a shooting coach, David Love, to take a wrench to his jump shot, and it really needed it. You saw him last season. It was like playing 4-on-5 at times. And Elfrid, he was good when he was driving to the hoop, or he was like Dwight, in the shadow of the basket. But anything outside of 5 feet, he just struggled. So that was a promising sign. Now I want to see a few more games of Elfrid making some shots before I declare that his shot, his once broken shot, is fixed.
That's right. Well, so far I've heard anecdotally from people talking to me and around the newsroom, people seem pretty excited about this Magic team so far. I mean, they've had very close games, all of them. They've been in it toward the end. Looking at some stats, they're averaging 103.4 points per game. Our Josh Robbins tweeted out that they're actually doing pretty well in some defensive categories as well. Is this just a mirage, or is there actually reason for optimism about this team?
Well, I think there's reason for optimism, just because when the season started and everybody saw that schedule, you had to be going, oh my. I mean, it could be 0-6, could be 1-5, because really the only team of those first 6 that didn't make the playoffs were the Oklahoma City Thunder. And a few years ago, they were in the NBA Finals, so and they're loaded. So I think what you have to say is they didn't get blown out, and they won 2 of those games against teams like that, not counting Philadelphia, they're awful. And they were in every game. And you say, well, they lost. Well, if they had gotten blown out, then the critics would really come out of the woodwork. So you can't have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. So this team's very competitive. Scott's pushing the right buttons. And it's early. Now the schedule is going to get a little bit softer. And we're going to see now if they can win games like they did in Philadelphia, if they can win those type of games against teams that are in their weight class.
We're going to transition and talk about some of the Magic players and how they're doing right now. But there's another interesting stat, and I think this kind of speaks highly to what Scott Skiles is doing with the team that he hasn't quite picked out. Perhaps no one's minutes are guaranteed, but they are doing it like a teamwork sort of way. Magic are the only team in the NBA with 4 players averaging at least 15.7 points per game, which is pretty good average, and also shows that they're spreading it around, that if you have one player who's down, there are probably some backups or some reserves that are going to jump up in there and give you some offensive production.
Well, one of Scott's coaching tenets, and this was true when he was a point guard in the NBA and here for the Magic for 5 years, is that don't dribble, dribble, dribble. This is Elfrid Payton's biggest adjustment from the coaching change. Last year, Elfrid got to dribble the ball around, go into the defenses, try my shot out, dribble back out. Scott doesn't want that. Scott wants cut, pass, cut, pass. This is what the San Antonio Spurs do to perfection. It looks like a concert when the Spurs play. And this is one of the changes, that everybody shares the ball when you do this. There's nothing worse than having a guy dribble the ball, pound the ball, and then the shot clock is down to 6, 7 seconds and he throws it. And there's a guy who's like, oh, okay, thanks. Now I have to shoot it, and it's going to be a bad shot. So this is really the biggest thing that Scott has brought to this team offensively is pass the ball, cut.
All right. Let's go through some of the players. The biggest concern, I think, is Nick Vucevic, who injured himself in the Rockets game. Tell me about his injury, Brian.
Well, Nick sustained a bone bruise, and if you saw it, if you watched the game, really your heart went in your throat, because out of all the things that have happened to the Magic the last few years, they've had some injuries. First thing you thought was, oh no, torn knee ligament, how long is he going to be out? Worse, ACL. But he just kind of jammed his leg, and it's called a bone bruise, and Bone bruises, especially for a 7-footer, they're a little bit more serious than you would think. So hopefully Nick can be back in a week and a half or so and only miss a few more games because they really miss him. I mean, he is Mr. Double-Double.
All right, so he is out, but filling in for him is Dewayne Dedmon, who we got to point out is 2-0 with him in the lineup there.
Absolutely.
So tell me about Dewayne. What's the differences between Vooch in the lineup and Dewayne Dedmon?
Dewayne Dedmon from Antelope Junior College. Probably had never heard of that one. Dewayne, the story with Dewayne is he didn't get to play much in high school because his mother's deep religious background. She didn't think sports had any part in growing up, so he had a late start in basketball. But he grew to 7 feet, and he is a terrific athlete. He's kind of everything that Vooch isn't on the defensive end. He's active. He blocks shots. He's got kind of an attitude toward him, and you wish that they could splice those two centers together and make one guy and of course Dedmon has no offensive skills, and Vooch has all the offense. But with Vooch out, he's done a terrific job because he is a shot-blocking presence, and that's something they don't have.
And that's good, especially keeping with the defensive-minded scheme of Skiles
Absolutely.
to try and get in there. All right, let's talk about Evan Fournier, who we mentioned is probably Scott Skiles' favorite player. We don't know if he's the Magic organization's favorite player because they had a chance to get him to a contract extension and kind of passed on that. Explain that whole process to me, if you would.
Well, he's finishing his rookie year, so his contract year as a rookie. So the next step, of course, is trying to sign on. Now they did the same thing with Tobias Harris. They couldn't meet what Tobias wanted before last season, so they said, okay, we'll let the market set what we want to pay, and it really worked out well for Tobias because he had a terrific season, and the Magic didn't even wait for anybody to counter because they signed him to a 4-year, $64 million deal. He's now the highest paid player on the team at $16 million. So Fournier is looking at those dollar signs and going, okay. What I've heard is that they wanted at least $10 million to start, and you're like, $10 million for Evan Fournier? Are you kidding? But the NBA is changing really quick. The salary cap is skyrocketing. So Tobias Harris at $16 million a couple years ago, that probably would have been 12. So it's all relative right now. And I think, Roger, that if they want to keep him and he's got Scott Skiles in his corner, and that's better than his agent maybe, I think Fournier is going to be about a $10, $12, $13 million a year player.
What I think is interesting with Fournier, when the Magic acquired him, and I think it was for the Aaron Aflalo deal, wasn't it?
Yes.
Going that. I remember it was either you or Josh. I was kind of, who is this? I didn't even know how to pronounce his name even. And said, oh, it's this guy. He can't shoot. I don't know why he's in here. And he actually has become, probably at least this season so far, one of the most important players for the Magic. Has he changed? Has he matured his game? Or did we just have bad scouting information on him and it was the Nuggets?
Well, the truth is, he did come in with some bad shooting numbers from France, and his first year in Denver, he didn't do a whole lot to dispel those notions. But he's a young guy, and you come over from playing abroad, and it's different. You have to adjust to the NBA skill level, and he has done that. He's only 23 years old, but what he brings is he's like a San Antonio Spurs type player, and you got to love those because they do the fundamental things that you love on a basketball court. He can shoot the three. He can drive to the hoop. He can play pretty good defense. Now he's 6'7". You might not think that he's that big, but he is. He's 6'7", and he's an adequate defender. But he gets all the players involved. He's sort of like a point forward in that regard. So Scott Skiles loves him because he moves the basketball. And I think you're going to see Fournier re-sign, and he's going to be part of this core.
All right, and then I guess the big question is, will he have the man bun coming back on his head, or is that going to see?
I don't know. I tried to grow the man bun, but it didn't quite work.
No,
you had the man bun.
We don't want to see that. That's
you
all
had
right.
the man bun, and then you had Alfred, who has that bedhead thing going on. So the Magic were leading the league in hairstyles, even though they were last in the standings. But I don't think Fournier is going to come with the man bun. But you want to see some of the clothes he's got. I mean, these are straight off the rack from Europe. all his teammates like, what do you have on now? What is that green, jumpsuit you have? But great guy, and he's going to help his team.
All right. Well, you brought up Elfrid. Let's kind of go to him in the point guard, because that's where a lot of interesting things are going on with the Magic right now. As we mentioned, Elfrid was definitely struggling early on. We saw a lot of Shabazz Napier and C.J. Watson, and I was actually kind of surprised at Napier's play. What do you think?
I'm right with you. I was surprised too, because it seemed like the Miami Heat this summer just gave him away. That they didn't really even think that highly of him. But Shabazz has worked on his game. What Scott Skiles likes about him, and what you have to like about your point guard, given that Peyton has some shooting struggles, is that Shabazz can shoot the ball, and he's fearless. Obviously played in some big games at UConn, played on 2 national championship teams. So he's not going to be intimidated, but he can get to the basket. He's not the greatest as far as setting up offenses, but I think he's learning. And if Skiles trusts you, that's a big feather in his cap. So when Peyton struggles, and he has, especially shooting the ball, you're going to see Shabazz and you're going to see C.J. Watson on the floor.
All right, what's the strength that Watson brings to the game? We know what Shabazz does. We know what Elfrid does. What does Watson bring?
Well, what Watson brings is obviously he's been in the league for 5 or 6 years. So getting an experienced backup point guard is huge, and getting one that can help you. They're all kind of the same after a while, but the one thing that C.J. Watson can bring the Magic is 3-point shooting, and this is really the department that they're lacking in. And the rookie Mario Hezonja, that's his strength. So, and with Channing Frye sentenced to the bench, basically, he's known as a pick and pop 3-point shooter. So right now, Watson and Hezonja are really providing their steady long range shooting. And as the season goes on, I think Watson really is going to be valuable, because you got to figure, Roger, that Peyton's going to have some more struggles.
Right, exactly. All right, let's talk about, you brought up Mario Hezonja, because I have a question about him, because the games have been so tight with the Magic. They've been so close. You have Evan Fournier playing so well that I'm seeing a lot less of Mario Hezonja than I thought I would, and I think fans are thinking that too. Is there any chance that this surge by Fournier and these very close games are going to kind of limit Hezonja's development and playing time?
Well, when the edict comes down that you're trying to win games as opposed to developing players, that still can't be put that back in the back burner, because the Magic are still rebuilding. I have to believe that Hezonja is going to get his shots. Now, the thing with both those guys is they're kind of interchangeable. Now, Fournier can play shooting guard and he can play small forward, and it's the same for the rookie from Croatia. Hezonja can play both spots. So I think maybe the guy who down the road may be affected is Victor Oladipo. I think if Victor has some games where he's not shooting the ball, you could see Hezonja playing shooting guard, or Fournier playing shooting guard. But you got to love this kid, because he has a lot of confidence, and in Spain, of course, they call it cockiness. But he's not afraid of the moment. And he hit a big 3 earlier this season in a game when nobody else seemingly wanted the ball. So to me, he's the best shooter on the team, and I think the more experience he gets, I think you'll see that. Now, long range, to me, Hezonja has to look at J.J. Redick. J.J.'s a perfect example of a guy who came out of college. Now, of course, J.J. played 4 years, but his body wasn't ready, and he just wasn't quite ready for the NBA physically. And JJ, for as good a shooter as he was not hitting shots in his first 2 or 3 years. But he worked at his game. He worked at it. So I think if Hezonja upholds anybody who he could model his game after, it would be JJ.
All right, you brought up Victor Oladipo, and actually he's had a little bit of a struggle to start the season as well. He's only shooting 38% from the field. He's about 27% on three-pointers. It's not a sophomore jinx. Is it a junior jinx, or is it just one of these things just shaking off rust to start the season?
I think sometimes you eventually see players as what they are, and perhaps on a really good team, Victor would be a 6th man. because at 6'3", it's a little small for a shooting guard, but he's a terrific athlete, pretty good on the defensive end. Now, in Victor's defense against Oklahoma City, he hit 2 buzzer beater shots that I know on press row we were like, what? Who took those shots? So that was Victor. So, he doesn't lack the confidence, but will he ever take that next step to be a 46, 47% shooter? And the other thing with Victor, and this just confounds everyone who watches, especially the coaches, cannot finish. You think a layup is a simple thing, but he cannot convert. And Scott Skiles has been on this with a couple guys, but Victor especially, driving to the hole but not being able to finish. And that's the other thing area where he could take his next step.
Yeah, I saw that a couple of times in the Raptors game where he would go up and it just didn't finish. You're thinking like, oh, he's going to put it up? Nope, there it goes. That sort of thing.
It's hard to believe.
All right, well, before we start looking ahead, let's one more item to look back on, and that would be in the Sixers game with our friend Jason Smith mixing it up with Nerlens Noel. Did you watch that, what happened with that?
I did watch that hockey game. And for Jason, Jason's such a nice guy. He's like Ryan Anderson, just real good guy, easy to talk to. And then Nerlens Noel comes down the court and he gives him one of these. And actually, I thought Jason Smith got away with murder.
Yes.
Because that was a sharp elbow to Noel's chest. And I can't believe when they watched the replay, when they got under the hood, they didn't go, oh yeah, this guy started it. And of course, Noel, and anybody would have been ticked. He went after him one of those roundhouses, and you can't do that in the league. You cannot effectively throw a punch, even though it was a bad one, and try to retaliate. It's always the guy that retaliates that gets it. But on the other hand, though, I kind of like that because somebody on the Magic finally in this rebuild is showing some toughness. And, if it's a hockey goon type move, well, okay, every once in a while, but yeah, I still think Jason got away with one there.
Well, now we know who the Magic's enforcer is, I guess. We go out there.
Yeah, he's the enforcer.
All right, so looking ahead to this week, the Magic start off Monday night at the Pacers. Pacers are 3-4. They have a different style of play than the Magic. How are the Magic, do you think, going to match up with them?
Well, for one thing, the Pacers have a star in Paul George, and the Magic do not. That is really where you start the scouting report. Because as we've seen in this early start, with so many games coming down to the wire, it helps to have that guy that you can give the ball to and say, give me a basket. And Scott Skiles made reference to that after the Oklahoma City game where he said, this is no knock against Billy Donovan, but he's got 2 guys he can run plays over and over and over again with. And that's what the Magic don't have. Now, Indiana's tried to pick up the pace a little bit. They traded Roy Hibbert, who's kind of a lumbering 7-foot center. Now, they probably lost some on the defensive end because Hibbert at one time was one of the best big men defenders in the league. But they picked up some scoring. George is healthy since breaking his leg in the Olympic trial last summer. And, he's still a force. And we're going to see, they moved him to power forward. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see Tobias Harris against Paul George. Tobias essentially now the power forward. That's going to be a key matchup. And the other thing I want to add is that the Pacers acquired Monta Ellis, and he can go up and down the floor, and he can get streaky. So those are really the 2 keys of the game, not to let one of those guys have a big night.
Right, and George is averaging 31 points in his last 3 games, so definitely want to try and stop him.
Please,
and a reunion night for C.J. Watson going back to the Pacers where he came from there. Wednesday night, and I can't believe that I'm old enough now to have seen this. This may be Kobe Bryant's last game in Orlando when the Lakers come to town Wednesday night.
Well, here's my idea. Here's what it is. Kobe didn't want any of these teams giving him gifts and testimonials and the highlight board. Okay, so to me, Kobe ought to grab the mic and thank the Magic because they gift wrapped a giant entertainment center about, 15 years ago named Shaquille O'Neal and gave him 3 championships. So I think Kobe ought to thank the Magic endlessly. And by the way, Kobe won a championship right here in 2009. So it's really a testament. You don't see guys play this long. This is his 20th season, and the last few years he's just been injury racked, and he's shooting the ball terribly, had his share of air balls. But I think Wednesday night is sort of an appreciation. He's like public art. You know, you kind of, you just kind of admire the guy for what he's done. But he is dragging a woeful Lakers team behind him. And he had the chance to get out of there if he wanted to, but it's hard to turn down $25 million.
Exactly. And, you know, it used to be everyone would look forward to the Lakers coming to town because of the stars they would bring, you know, looking back when Magic was with them and Kobe, Shaq when he would come back to boo, you know, when he was with the Lakers. But now we kind of look forward to them because this could be one of the easier games for the Magic this season because Lakers are just really bad. I mean, they're giving up about 110 points per game this season.
Yeah, well, it's a weird dynamic going on in Los Angeles. They have all these young lottery picks, but at the same time, they have this old relic who's kind of dragging them down. Now, he's obviously one of the big time stars in Lakers history, and they cater and they appreciate those guys. And Kobe's delivered them 5 championships, so that's a pretty good trade-off. But when Kobe Bryant is dominating the ball and he's taking bad shots, it's not really getting your young players, providing them with a culture, and not to mention just winning games. But D'Angelo Williams, Julius Randle, those are 2 very good. Jordan Clarkson, 3 very good Laker players, and you know they still have Kobe up on this pedestal. So no, the Lakers are down to what, a half a star right now. he's just not the same guy.
All right. And then the Western Tour continues on Friday night. The Utah Jazz come to town. Probably a little tougher competition for the Magic. The Jazz are 4-2 this year. They're second in the Western Conference. What makes the Jazz so tough?
Well, the Jazz have some nice pieces like the Magic do, like Milwaukee, some of these other teams. Gordon Hayward's a small forward and a terrific scorer in this league. He was one of the young guys that got a big whopping contract after Charlotte gave him a deal as a restricted free agent, and Utah matched. Derek Favors, another terrific young player. But the guy that really makes the Jazz go, especially defensively, is Rudy Gobert. He's from France, so Evan and him will have some nice chats. This guy is 7 feet tall. He's about 200 pounds. He's just a wire, but he blocks everything. He blocks everything within sight, and he's really made a difference in that Jazz team. So you hope Vucevic gets back by that game, so the Magic can counter with Vuce against Gobert.
So for all those folks who speak French, they'll be able to see how they're communicating back and forth there in the game, which probably won't be PG-13 language.
It might not be.
Not that much. All right, Saturday the Magic get their first rematch of the season going against the Washington Wizards. Wizards have won now 9 straight against the Magic. Do you see the streak ending anytime soon?
Wow. Well, you know, the Magic had a chance in their opener against the Wizards. And it was right down the stretch. But again, Washington has an all-star, John Wall. Wall drives the lane, makes a floater. Magic can't answer. And that's the thing that Scott Skiles is dealing with. You just don't have that one guy that you can give the ball to at the end of the game. The Magic is sort of pot luck. Who's ever hot, who's been hot, who has the best matchup. But John Wall, one of the fastest players in the league, so difficult to guard. And they just collect fouls against him too. Bradley Beal from Florida, terrific outside shooter as their shooting guard. That's going to be a great backcourt. And that's why the Wizards are looking to this summer and hoping they can lure Kevin Durant, who's from the D.C. area, to play with this team. And you put Wall, Beal, and Durant on a team, that's pretty scary.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'd prefer Durant come to Orlando. Maybe.
How about that?
Yeah, it might be a little bit better. All right. Well, I just want to ask you one final question. Last week was the 26th anniversary of the very first Magic game back at the old Arena, playing against the Nets. Were you at that game?
I was at that game, surprisingly enough.
26 years ago.
Yeah, I was pounding on a cave wall with doing my doing my story on a tablet. But
Oh, I got a tablet. This
yeah,
kind.
that was a wild time. That expansion season, and really, the whole year they had consecutive sellouts, and it was all new to Orlando. This was football country, and we weren't used to seeing a professional basketball team. And I think everybody was pinching themselves that we actually had the NBA. But yeah, it was a great atmosphere, and I don't think they'll ever quite duplicate that. We've had the Shaq and Penny and Dwight years, but it was the first time, and it was some great memories from that season.
And do you recall the Magic's record in that first month of November?
I believe it was 7-7.
There you
Get
go.
out
You
of
get
here.
the prize.
Anything else you got?
That's right. 7-7. Let's see if the Magic can match that this month, huh?
7-7. Yeah, we might have a parade.
That's right. That'd be great. All right. Stay with OrlandoCentral.com for all your Orlando Magic coverage from Brian Schmitz, Josh Robbins, Charles King, our whole Magic core. I'm Roger Simmons. Thank you for joining us today for Magic Now. We'll see you next week.